Welcome, listeners, to the Grande Bouffe, the Big Feast, with myself, Cole Smithey, and this week's special guest, a gentleman who writes for Pinland Empire, The Pink Smoke, has a podcast,
Zebras in America, with co-host Scott Dura.
Mr. Marcus Pinn.
Hello.
Welcome to the Grande Bouffe. As always, we are here to copiously consume international politics and culture through the prism of a single film and a different craft beer each week. And this one has brought us to one of yours and my favorite movies.
Yeah,
Andrei Rublev.
I'd say it's from one of my favorite filmmakers. Mm-hmm. I gotta go with The Mirror if it's gonna be my favorite Tarkovsky film.
Okay.
But still, Andrei Rublev is I mean, he only has so many movies to begin with.
Right.
So if you love Tarkovsky, you kind of love all of his movies. So this is a movie I love, though, regardless. So.
And I think, is this his fourth or fifth movie, do you know?
Ivan's Childhood, Violent Ivan's Childhood. No, isn't this his third? Or depending on how you count, Steamroller and the Violin. The Steamroller and the Violin. It's either his second or his third. But what am I missing between Ivan's Childhood and this?
I will look it up.
I think this is it. Yeah.
There's so much to say about Andrei Tarkovsky. So he had a short in '56, The Killers, and then There Will Be No Leave Today, '59, The Steamroller and the Violin, '61, Ivan's Childhood, '62, and Andrei Rublev, '66, and then of course Solaris, '71, The Mirror, '74, Stalker, '79. The First Day is also oddly credited as coming out in '79, and then Nostalgia and Voyage in Time, which is a documentary, and then The Sacrifice.
Yeah.
So let's talk about why we love Tarkovsky so much. It's a minimalist approach that he takes, but it's also very representational. Everything that he does is it has a ring of neo-realism to it.
Well, it's easy for me to talk about why one of the biggest reasons why I love Tarkovsky, because if you go to my site, Pinland Empire, you know that I'm really big on influences, visual similarities, stuff like that. And I'm the kind of guy, given my age, I'm 37, I was born in 81. I was very much, this is movies, music, whatever was current, I would just consume it like crazy. But then I would go back and like, hey, where did this come from? Or like, what do the people responsible for this piece of art that I like, what do they like? And quite a few things led me back to Tarkovsky, specifically Lars von Trier. Mm-hmm. You read enough about him, and then I remember one of the few kind of like critically constructive, positive things to ever come from the IMDb message board were that a lot of people were mentioning this Tarkovsky guy in the forum section for Lars von Trier, and I was like, the IMDb, I'm glad, the message board was just a terrible, terrible place on IMDb.com, but then I was like, who's this Tarkovsky guy? And then, once I discovered some of his films, I've worked in a video store before, and even before then, I would just spend a lot of time in video stores, so you see the covers, and it's just like, oh, this movie, oh, that movie, so that's kind of how, and I'd say, Element of Crime is probably like the main film that got me to go backwards, for Tarkovsky. And that works on a lot of levels. Like when I was still in my late teens, George Washington came out, mm-hmm. and then that made me go backwards to, Terrence Malick. Same with like Gummo, Harmony Korine. I was in high school when that came out, and then the guy that worked at the video store was like, hey, you should check out this Werner Herzog guy. So it was just like whoever was present, and then I would just kind of work my way back. And
sure.
Tarkovsky's like one of those examples.
And Bellatar, of course.
Yeah, actually, Bellatar I didn't even get into till maybe after college, honestly.
Uh-huh.
Although at the same time, by a certain point, when you get into especially art films, you hear that name. And I didn't even really dive into it. I was late in the game. It wasn't until Jerry came out. I was still in college. Mm-hmm. And there's that whole 4-movie period with Gus Van Sant, from Jerry through Paranoid Park, where he he himself credited Bellatar, as an influence, not as much as critics did, but then it was just like, I love those 4 movies, so I was like,
oh, do you? You think you like?
Check out
I think,
at different levels.
Yeah, I think
different levels.
I think Jerry's pretty unwatchable personally.
See, I'm one of those guys where it's like I can't like argue that. It's like fair enough. Like it's totally it's totally understandable. So yeah, but Tarkovsky, and then Tarkovsky. Around the time when I started my site and got really into it, I was able to see Tree of Life. A little earlier, I happened to be in France, and it came out in France before it came out in the U.S. So I saw it. And then there were these like images where it was like Jessica Chastain floating. Obviously, that comes from the mirror. There's so much stuff from Malick's like post 70s stuff that comes directly from Tarkovsky, and that got so around. I was already a fan of Tarkovsky at that point. I had seen all his movies, but by that I was still in my mid-20s. That was like he was still kind of like film school. Like these are the movies you have to see if you like movies.
And he's a true art film director, and I see a lot of Bergman in his influence. I think that
he'll tell you that, but he'll say that himself.
If of course,
Andrei Tarkovsky interviews.
It's very clear that that he's working in a very similar dialectic as Bergman. And when people talk about art films, these are iconic art films.
Absolutely.
This is an iconic film. If you were gonna say, well, what's a prime example of an art film? This would certainly fit the bill.
And and it's tough too because Andrei Rublev, which if I had to rank the Tarkovsky films, it's in the top half. Again, not that he has a whole lot.
Sure.
But it's something that like I'd recommend last. Mainly just because of its length.
Yeah.
And because of its...
The length doesn't bother me.
Well, that's me and you. Most people are kind of like, you know what I'm saying? Like
my favorite film of all time is 1900, the 4-hour and 45-minute.
Fair enough. I just think, too, the way what people... I'm not even talking about folks the majority of folks who would listen to this podcast are me and you. It's like your average movie fan isn't necessarily like a big art house fan.
Right.
But it's like when you love a movie so much, no matter what, you just want to recommend. Like I'm the kind of guy I want everyone to see it, no matter how weird I may think it is. But the older I get, it's like let me slow down because maybe people might not be into it right away.
I'm not so concerned about I guess the audience at large. I think that cinema, Miles Davis used to always say, you play for yourself first. And I think that it's it's a similar thing with filmmakers. Obviously, Tarkovsky had a great team of people that he worked with, and they worked very rigorously on creating the scripts for these films. And it's fascinating to me how much he works with natural landscape in his idiom. So that's I love there's so many shots you could talk about, but there's the shot where the mud has been dripping down. I don't know, maybe it's about it's when the bell is made.
Oh, sure.
Toward the end of the film, and it's just this shot of the ground, and you're hearing the dialogue happening as you're looking at this art that nature has created, essentially.
Sure. The thing too, as far as shots too, I think my favorite. Well, so listeners know the movie is playing and it's projecting in the background as we talk. And my second favorite shot from that film, the very beginning with the hot air balloon scene, that whole sequence is great. But my favorite sequence is the witches sequence. It's something that gives me it kind of gives me chills.
Oh, the pagans?
Yes, but it's also I always call it the witches scene, but it's it's like them running through with torches naked through the forest, and like that whole shot that follows them through the branches into the water. It's such a beautiful shot, and like you see, I mean, look at The Revenant, like that opening shot.
Well, it's so interesting that and I think that was one of the scenes we were talking just a little bit before we started recording about. There's so much to unpack about this movie, so many controversies, and I think that the nudity and I guess the fornication, of which there is certainly occurring, set censors' teeth on edge.
Sure, especially, and not to, whatever, but like with Russian cinema and Russian laws, rules, whatever, it's slightly more rigorous, obviously, than maybe other countries, which eventually is what kind of, for various other reasons too, what kind of drove Tarkovsky out, and that's what gave us like nostalgia and sacrifice.
But it makes the primeval culture of the time so realistic. And
this is the thing. I really feel like I'm in the 1500s when
it's amazing,
or 15th century rather. When I'm watching this movie, like when I watch this movie, I know that folks involved were not having a good time.
Right.
Like this definitely doesn't seem okay. Cut, and it's just like, oh, let's go off to our trailer, have a Capri Sun or whatever. It looked like just like Jesus. I don't want to do this take again, or it's like I don't want to be here. Very like before, like an Apocalypse Now or Heart of Darkness rather. It seemed like that, but
yeah. I should mention the beer that we're drinking just because.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I had a hard time coming up with a beer, and I thought, well, I'm just going to go for one of my favorites because it's Stone Delicious IPA, and I find it delicious, and I find this to be a really delicious movie. So I thought, why not? So
it's not as tart. Like I'm a Saison DuPont, Blue Moon, Shock Top guy. Like IPAs are usually a little too like bitter for me, but this is really smooth. Like, when you were pouring it, like I like the color of it. I was like, I like this color, so I'm gonna.
Yeah, Stone Brewing is one of my faves, and this one's got lemon drop and El Dorado hops in it. 7.7 ABV, so it's got a kick to it.
Very cool.
Little alcohol kick to it.
Nice.
So back to Andrei Rublev.
Yeah.
Who is a historic figure. Mm-hmm. He was a painter, did a lot of interiors of churches.
Right.
And so this is a cinematic poem, if you will, an homage to his life and the times that he lived.
Yeah, it's also a little bookmark. I have to throw this in there. I studied, my major in college was architecture, and I work in the design world. So it's also that, too, like, painters and their work were part, like you said, he painted interiors of churches. They were, painters and architects were kind of, to some degree, depending on who we're talking about, on the same level. So, and it's just like his work was an integral part of just say like the structure of some of the places where his work was seen. So that's another kind of important thing. Also, like architecture is one of those things where it's so prevalent. It's just like, yeah, buildings and bridges and structures, they're there. We don't need to talk about them because they're there. But sometimes, it's nice to kind of get into it. Like rarely are there movies like The Fountainhead, also, the book, where it's just like, hey, this is about architecture. Or there'll be a movie where it's like a character in the movie's an architect, but that's really all they get into. It's never just like about that person's business or their work. So,
and we even get a sense of how these assignments are handed down, and the movie's broken up. I believe it's 7 parts.
7 pieces. Yep.
7 pieces.
We're in the Jester segment still, I believe.
And I mean, we're looking at the projector right now. We're looking at the movie, and where did he find these actors? They're all so great.
Sure. Well, a couple have appeared, like the title character is like, because
there are a lot of his regular crew.
Right. I feel bad. I can't think of his name right now. Oh, Jesus!
That's right.
I'm sorry.
That's right.
Yeah, he appears. He has that quick scene in the mirror. He's in Solaris. He's in most of. I think most of Tarkovsky's Russian work, which isn't a lot. But yeah, the people seem authentic. Like when I look, there's this, when you look at, well, obviously photos, but still like pictures of folks or photos of people from a long time ago, they have this there's this weathered look to, like people just looked different.
Yeah.
Back then, like a lot of these people really look authentic. Like they came from no, I don't notice outright. I mean, there's a couple of hair choices that look a little fake, but as far as like the clothing, the facial hair, it's so authentic. It's very, very authentic. Oh, what I wanted to say earlier too, another reason is what's hard to, get this movie across at first is because also, like I was saying, with like typical moviegoers, when it comes to like, I'm doing air quotes, biopics, it's like so-and-so was born here, all this stuff happened in the middle, and then they passed away. Like this is a very unconventional, and I'm a big fan.
Yeah, the form is very unconventional because
and it's long too, which is important.
We lose Andrei Rublev for a big chunk of the movie.
Yeah, well, it's and so many things have been written about Andrei Rublev, and if you want to go to PinlandEmpire.com, you can read quite a lot, there too. But a lot of people have said that it's like, he's kind of just like the catalyst, or just the like secondary almost figure. It's really more about like Russia at that time and just the background,
medieval Russia.
It's really.
And he was famous for painting these religious icons.
Yeah.
And he was a very talented and gifted painter.
Yeah.
Who we have this apprentice who comes along and apprentices with him, and things don't go very smoothly.
Sure.
And I think that it also speaks to this idea that I see in our culture. I think it is vanishing of paying dues. When the guy first when he first meets Rublev, he just says I'll just come and ask for me in my village in front of everybody, so that everybody knows that you came and asked for me to be your apprentice, and I'll work for you, and I'll be your slave, and I'll work like a dog. And I think about that is the antithesis of millennial existence, that that you would have to go and apprentice and pretty much sell your soul to learn your craft.
Well, it's kind of, that's the thing too nowadays. The whole idea of like, again, this is going back to architecture and just in general, working under someone or being an apprentice. It's kind of like a dirty thing now. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, when you're in that apprenticeship, it's easy to. This isn't new. Like it's easy to be taken advantage of, obviously. But like,
sure.
But again, that's one of the reasons I'm here and what I'm all about is just like apprenticeship, working under someone, like getting little residues of influence. So like I'm all about that, and that's like
And at a certain point, either the student decides for himself that it's time to leave the teacher, or the teacher somehow ejects the student.
Yeah, it's funny too.
And it's never pretty, I don't think.
No, of course not. And it's a classic story, whether it's like a kung fu movie or a crime film where you have like the head, thief, and he has this guy that works under him, and now he's like, you know what, I'm taking over. I want to do my own thing. It's a timeless story. But it's funny you bring up millennials too, because it's weird. I've never been clear. Like I was born in '81, so some people say I'm a millennial. Some people say I'm on the back end of Generation X, which I definitely don't.
No, I don't think. I think you're Generation Y.
Exactly.
I think you're pre-millennial.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny.
How old are you? 36.
37.
37.
I was born in late '81.
Yeah, you're definitely pre-millennial.
Cool. I appreciate that because I noticed a lot of pushback going, and this is focusing on film, and a lot of it has to do with Tarkovsky references and influences that I post on my Twitter. A lot of people act as if the whole idea of like being influenced doesn't exist. Like that's the one thing that'll get me going on Twitter when like, and that's why like I'll start finding quotes from the filmmaker, so it just really can't be argued. Because in the past,
sure,
this is my own naivete. It would just be like, oh yeah, everyone knows that. Like we'll go back to like David Gordon Green loves Terrence Malick, or like Todd Haynes, he loves Fassbender, or he loves Douglas Sirk. But then like a 23-year-old, know-it-all 23-year-old who hasn't even read the first book on Todd Haynes, or just listen to a director's commentary, where they will say like there's something about. I guess these are directors now who'd be between like in their late 40s to their early 60s, had no qualms about being like, oh, I just wanted to be like so-and-so. Oh, I lifted this scene from so-and-so. Listen to Paul Thomas Anderson, his commentary on, say, Hard Eight.
Listen to Martin Scorsese.
Or Boogie Nights, like, I wanted to do this, I wanted to do that.
Same story.
And going to Tarkovsky, and specifically Rublev, Andrei, Lars von Trier is one of the biggest champions of Tarkovsky. And not just that, just like, around the time doing press for Element of Crime, he was just like, I just wanted to make a film like Andrei Rublev. I just wanted to be Tarkovsky.
Well, I just want to say that Far From Heaven is one of my favorite Todd Haynes films, and I was disappointed with his most recent film, but nonetheless he is.
That's I think it's we might have to table this for another topic because I could talk for hours about my issues. First of all, Todd Haynes is one of my favorite filmmakers, but I always have issues with Far From Heaven, ranging from like Dennis Haysbert's motivation. Like you're too smart of a guy to know you don't do some of the things you do at that time. Yeah. Also, just like Dennis Quaid's character, which I've gotten over certain issues I had with Quaid's character, but that's a movie I could just go on forever about. So maybe we'll come back and talk,
maybe we'll.
I don't want to.
Maybe we'll come back and talk about that one. And also, you bring up Element of Crime, which I've been curious about for a long time. Zentropa was my introduction to Von Trier. I saw Zentropa when it came out back in the 80s.
Oh, it's funny. I call it Europa, but I think the original title is Zentropa.
Yeah. And I recently watched Element of Crime, and I really appreciate it.
For the first time.
For the first time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I really appreciate it. It's I don't know if it's on Filmstruck now, but it was on Filmstruck, and I watched Andrei Rublev on Filmstruck, and of course the 4K restoration is being shown in New York City at Lincoln Center.
Nice.
So if you're in Manhattan this coming weekend, then maybe you want to look it up and go check it out for yourself. And you know, if so, maybe you want to turn off the podcast now and come back to it.
Yeah, and you said Lincoln Center, right?
Yeah, Lincoln Center.
Yeah, and that's
Film
a good theater,
Society at Lincoln Center.
And that's a good theater to see it in because I've watched this movie. I can't even say this is a movie I watch like all the time because how can you? At least me. But the only movie theater big screen experience that I've had with Andrei Rublev was at Anthology Film Archives, which that for about 2 years. I had my 30th birthday at Anthology Film Archives.
Oh, nice.
That was my second home. I lived off the same bus route.
When's your birthday?
I used to live off 2nd Ave. Just passed August 7th.
Oh, happy birthday.
Thank you.
Fellow Leo.
Thank
July,
you. Yeah.
July 26th.
Leo season.
Cheers.
And it's like, it's like, as much as I love Anthology Film Archives, it's not the most comfortable theater, especially the upstairs theater. It's not slanted. It's like these
all right,
like hard chairs, so it's kind of like
let's dish on the New York City cinemas for a second.
Sure.
Have you been to the Quad since they did their
I haven't. No.
$1.2 million renovation?
I haven't.
I have to say the screen
wow, I haven't.
the screen is probably about this big. I've got a 75-inch screen on my wall for the projector, and sadly I think that they could have maximized their screens more. I'm very curious about Film Forum, which just reopened
sure.
a couple weeks ago.
That's a staple, so that's good.
And got to check that out. And I think that Angelica is Angelica closed right now?
Honestly, I haven't been to Angelica in a year. I wouldn't even know.
All of the art house, or a lot of the art house Manhattan cinemas have been doing renovations all at the same time. It's funny how they all, I guess, nodded at each other and said, "Okay, we're gonna go for it. You know, we got the money that we need." But I'm really excited to see what Film Forum. They added another cinema there. I think they have four cinemas now.
And speaking of New York cinemas, I'm a Queens guy now, so I spend my time at Moving Image a lot, and they added 2 screens, which I wasn't even aware of until earlier this year when I renewed my membership. But that's a really comfortable theater. It's also a cool theater, to be in. And again, even if like I'm trying to go to Metrograph quite a bit. The theater itself is great. There's like a little pretentious tone to it, but at the same time, like with Metrograph Quad, no matter what, I still hope everyone listening will still go, to the theater. I know there's some improvements, whether it be price or whatever, but it's like, most movies, I'm not even going to say all, but still most movies are meant to be seen at least first time if you have the ability to see it, in a theater. Like I watch a lot of episodic TV these days.
Wholeheartedly.
And, it's like, at least, I'm not going to say all cinema because that's crazy, but a lot, especially like U.S. cinema, it's kind of in trouble because there's some good television out there. And a lot of film directors are now working in TV. A lot of like film actors. There used to be a total separation, like TV people were TV people.
Absolutely.
Film actors were and now it's just kind of like, So.
Yeah. Well, I do my due diligence with having a projector because I feel like at least it's not a gross plasma thing that's going to end up rotting in the earth for a million years. It's a lot. It's less impact on the ecology, and it's a decent sized screen, so it really is a true home theater. But I could not agree with you more about the importance of seeing movies on the big screen, especially a movie like this. I mean, 75-inch screen is probably about the smallest thing you want to watch it on. Certainly, don't watch movies on your cell phones. That's just ridiculous.
Oh no,
that's just silly.
I've got 70 movies on my phone. It's for me. It's now just so everyone listening. I have a lot of movies on my phone, but every one of these movies are movies that I have seen on the big screen first,
right?
Or movies that I just know well. But
there
it's
you
like,
go. There you go.
When I have a rough day, I like to just watch Thief or To the Wonder or A Guy Mad and Short or all the random stuff I have on my phone.
I spent about 2 months watching Rosemary's Baby over and over. I had the VHS and I just watched it.
That's another movie I have. I got
Rosemary's
Baby
over.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah.
So all right. So back to Andrei Rublev, who is an artist who I don't think. If it weren't for this movie, I don't think his name would be spoken at all.
Right.
Not in America.
Wow. Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up because it reminds me. There's like another. it's not as nearly as long, but I think another reason I love this movie is because it always reminds me of, going back to what you just said, Greenaway's The Belly of an Architect.
Sure.
Because it focuses on...
You're a Greenaway fan?
Love Peter Greenaway.
Oh, yeah, me too.
Love him. Even, you know...
I met him in San Francisco. It was during the San Francisco Film Festival. It was like 96.
Is he as gruff and kind of off-putting?
No, he was.
Oh, really?
He was amazing. I
Nice.
I had the best chat with him for about a half hour.
Oh, that's
and
awesome.
of course, it's Peter Greenaway, so you want to. You want to dig in. I was
I
was really young. I was too young for the job, but I was trying to just, pick his brain and ask him as many questions as I could, just because he's such an interesting person.
He tweeted back at me once on Twitter. That was like,
that's
that was one
fun.
of my Twitter highlights. This was years ago, yeah. But Belly of the Architect focuses on this kind of like, no one would have known who he was except for Belly of an Architect, and that's not even that huge of a movie. Boulet,
right.
Whose work was Etni. I'm butchering his first name, but Boulet was his last name. A lot of his work is just through sketch. Like a lot, I don't really think too many things were constructed, and that reminds me of Andrei Rublev, similar to what you said, where it's like if this movie didn't exist, because it's funny. Like a lot of film people, you hear them talk about Andrei Rublev as if he's on the same level of like he's a household name, which is kind of funny. And outside of maybe like the art world, art critics and film folks, he's not, like his contemporaries or just other big name, big painters. He's not as known or.
So let's talk about the controversies and the different cuts of the movie. I know that I think it was shown in Cannes in '67. Am I right about that?
I thought 66 or 67.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And do you know if that was the 3-hour 6-minute version that they showed?
It was the 3+ hour. I know it was the long.
It might have been the longer one. I think the original one was 3 hours and 15 minutes, and Tarkovsky and his team worked on the edits and just made overlong scenes, what they thought were overlong scenes, shorter, and cut it down to the 3 hour and 6-minute version that we're watching. That's available on Filmstruck. Yeah. But there are a lot of elements in the movie. We were talking about the pagan sequence, and Tarkovsky's attention throughout it. One of the touchstones of his style and of his approach to cinema is just ingrained in nature.
Sure.
And so there's a scene where a horse suffers a really bad fall. A deadly fall. Yeah. And he also uses a horse. He uses horses a lot as an image system in his movies.
Yeah.
And the scene that we were talking about in the beginning, where it's a guy he's got a hot air balloon.
Yeah.
And it's probably one of the first hot air balloons, and he's flying, and you really get that exhilaration of first flight. You really feel like when you're watching it that you could be somebody living in the 1500s, and you're flying, you're experiencing flight for the first time.
Absolutely, and a scene that was pretty much recreated in The Element of Crime. There's this overhead shot scene and the scene with the helicopter and everything, which also reminds me too. I didn't even mention how just like within that hot air balloon scene, the shot of the donkey, which is one of the most, in my opinion, like when you think of like the art house film, like we were saying earlier, it's one of the most like important shots that like you see it come up in like Ray Gaddis's work. I mean, going back to The Element of Crime again, the movie start just like how Andrei Rublev starts. There's a random scene where like a donkey is trying to stand up and walk around, just
I think that Element of Crime is a very interesting movie, and from an artistic perspective, from an art installation perspective, you could show it at the Guggenheim, on the wall, and people would just go watch it and stand there for a long time and watch it.
I definitely would.
But I don't think that it's. I think it is. It has the mark of a first film.
Oh, 1,000%! It's totally made by like someone in their early 20s who wants to be cool.
Yeah.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
But for me, Lars von Trier and his filmography, it's hard to separate the two. So I have a different that's why when you just said what you said, I'm like, how could you say that? It's just more like, again, I get it. I just think knowing Lars von Trier, like his style, no matter how first film it is, all the elements from every von Trier film are there. Just the whole idea of like rules. first and foremost, like every Lars von Trier movie is there's some kind of rule, whether it's like broken up by chapters or like the plot of the movie has to do with a book that someone follows, just like an element of crime, or
Sure.
just like because Lars von Trier always explained the way he was brought up, he didn't have any rules as a kid, and he always thought that like ruined him to some degree, which is why he loved film school, because he's like, film school has rules. And Lars von Trier is one of the first people I ever remember hearing like advocating for film school, because there's always this like, whether it's Stanley Kubrick or Tarantino or Robert Rodriguez,
just make the movie,
or the lesser known like
make
Wong
the
Kar-wai.
movie.
It's like, and sometimes like, you know what, it ain't that easy as you make it out to be. And I think a lot of people look to those like 2 to 4 examples of people.
I'd
when it's
really
just
love
like,
to have
you.
you.
Know what?
I'd really
Go
love
to
to have you on the show to talk about Mandalay. By the way.
Oh yeah. I've quite a lot. I have a lot to say about that movie too.
Because I just watched it recently, and for the first 100 episodes of Le Grand Bouffe, I had a millennial co-host, Mike Lacey, and we had scheduled that movie. We were going to discuss Mandalay, but we got our wires crossed, and Mike showed up and hadn't watched the movie, so we had to do it. We had to do a different film.
I could talk about just my viewing. I saw that in the theater.
Yeah, I saw it in Cannes.
Being the only black person in a theater, and also just like the amount of, hey, look, I'm not going to tell anybody what to do, but I did note the all the laughter. It's like there were certain parts like, what exactly was funny about that? But that's another, people have different experience. I'm black, you're not black, so maybe you'll find this different.
And this is another thing. I saw some back and forth between Glenn Kenny, who writes for the Times, and my buddy Matt Blankman, who's been on the show a couple times, on Twitter, and they were talking about people laughing in the cinema. And I of course I've experienced it from both sides, where everybody's laughing and I'm just thinking to myself, that shit ain't funny. And then of course the other times when it's something like The House of Jack, where I fully expect to have Gaspar Noé's experience, where I'm going to be cracking up and nobody else will be laughing.
Yeah. I remember it was like that. There was all that controversy last year about Get Out. Like I saw Get Out twice in the theater. Yeah. And I was well aware on social media how just like all the laughter. And it's like, it's weird. Like, the whole idea of a dark comedy almost just went out the window when it came to Get Out, because I remember all the people laughing. The whole idea, the term of the sunken place, it's like a joke, keyword joke. But then when it was just, it was considered a comedy, everyone got up in arms like, what? This isn't funny. It's like, you laughed for more than half the time when you went to go see that. Like, you can still be socially, culturally relevant or woke, as everyone likes to say, and laugh, and it can still be important. It could still be a dagger in the chest or whatever. So,
sure.
But anyway.
Sure. Yeah. All right. So we're trying to stay on the Tarkovsky, Andrei Rublev subject matter.
The second part now for those you can't see.
And he the way that he weaves in the religious iconography and the expectation that people have from each other and from society and from the people that are running the show. I mean, we certainly find out a lot more about that when the invasion occurs. But I wanted to stay on the subject of the controversial aspects of the film, because I think a 2018 audience would look at this movie and think that well, I don't know if tame is the word.
I know what you're getting at. I understand
but
what
it's
you're
not.
trying to say.
It's not shocking. It's not exploitation. And that's for me. I understand about the people that get up in arms about the horse being killed. And of course, I read.
Wasn't a cow set on fire too?
I read
that whole sequence?
Cow had an asbestos blanket.
Oh, okay.
So, and this is like the stuff that people did through the stones that they threw at Von Trier at Cannes, because there's a scene
in Mandalay
where, in House that Jack built, where supposedly it chops off the legs of a little chicken or something, a little duckling, and puts it in the water, and of course, movie magic, the animal is not harmed.
Of course,
it just looks like it was. Now, in this case, a horse was brought in from the abattoir, because horse meat is, maybe not in America, but in places like Russia and France, horse meat is a popular delicacy. And so they brought a horse from the abattoir. Somebody pushed the horse off of this staircase. It falls on a spike. It's pretty ugly. And then what happened was, of course, the horse was shot in the head immediately after. And so,
Yeah. Well, that reminds me, going back to Mandalay, that's why John C. Reilly left the movie.
tell me.
The donkey, that was, they actually killed the donkey in Mandalay.
Okay.
And John C. Reilly's a big animal
rights
advocate.
Yeah.
He was on set, like he was there. The role that he was supposed to play was the role of, what was the kid? He's,
Doesn't matter.
Dominic, whatever his name is. He's in Dogville and Mandalay. So John C. Reilly walked off set. Not that I'm justifying this, but the donkey was set to be put down. And Lars von Trier's defense was like the donkey got to live a few months longer than it was supposed to. But that's such a Lars von Trier response.
Sure.
But
sure.
yeah, no, it's like you said. I think the animal killing stuff would be a bigger issue today.
Yeah.
I definitely think specifically certain animals. I think certain people care more about animals than people.
That's for sure. That's a
sometimes
very
I have a problem
salient
with, sometimes
point.
not.
Yeah, that's a very salient point.
But it's hard to separate. Just like the way you even just described it, like just pushing a horse off the steps, and I'm visualizing that. We're not there yet, obviously, but just visualizing that scene, it's pretty rough.
It's horrifying, but it really puts you in that hard scrabble time period of medieval Russia, and I like you said earlier about how this is not a movie where anybody was having a good time. Everything was dirty and grimy, and he really keeps it in that mode, and it's part of the story. And what I like about this, in talking about the format of biopics, everybody knows that come this time every year, Hollywood's going to crank out some new biopic that's Oscar bait.
Yeah.
That's probably going to, it's cradle to grave.
Yeah, exactly.
Standard issue format. But what Tarkovsky does with the story is that he tells the story of the culture. He's not just telling this. The movie is called Andrei Rublev, and because obviously that's where the narrative emphasis is. Mm-hmm. But just as importantly is the social climate that he lived in, and you can't understand a person if you don't have some understanding of the social climate that they're existing in. And when you're living in medieval times, there's no there's no creature comforts.
Sure.
And the guy who talks about toward the end of the movie, he spent the night in the river because he got chased by wolves into the river.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a situation that you have to survive.
Yeah. I'm glad I was born when I was born. Also.
People, life is cheap.
Yeah.
And it's interesting also how he uses what would in a Hollywood movie, people that would be total secondary characters you might only see for 3 scenes or 4. The kid who he's the son of the bell-maker. Mm-hmm. And the actor is phenomenal. Sure. He's so great. Absolutely. He really reminds me of the actor from Come and See. Do you know that movie? Come and See?
I know Come and See? Of course. God. Speaking of, I mean, Tarkovsky's influence.
Cinema. Yeah, absolutely.
Again, just it goes to his age. Elem Klimov, director of Come and See, is another guy I'm not going to say he fawned and gushed over Tarkovsky, but he definitely mentions Tarkovsky by name quite a few times, especially when it comes to Come and See. Come and See is it's a masterpiece. Like, to me, it's one of those movies that like cleared the path and paved the way for a film like Thin Red Line to exist, where it's like it's a war film, but there's also some beauty within this war film. Yeah. It's also a little trippy. It's also a little disorienting.
I think it's a lot better. I think it's a lot better than Thin Red Line. I think it's a lot better.
I think it's better. But I love both movies, I guess.
I saw it at San Francisco Film Festival in '98. I had moved to New York, and I went back to clear up my affairs in San Francisco. And in the San Francisco Film Festival brochure, it said that it was Sean Penn's favorite movie. And I said, well, that's all. I didn't know that. That's all I need to hear. I'm gonna see it.
There's that Thin Red Line connection right
yeah,
there.
Well, there you go.
Also, he said in '98, which is when that movie came out. Thin Red Line, at least.
Wasn't
That's funny.
Weren't a lot of his scenes cut out? Weren't a lot of Sean Penn's scenes?
No, because again he worked with Terrence Malick again on Tree of Life. It wasn't Sean Penn. It was Adrian Brody and George Clooney, who
got cut
a lot, and other actors like Gary Oldman had a scene in Thin Red Line. Mickey Rourke had it. Well, if you have the Criterion, you can at least see Mickey Rourke's scene. But no, Sean Penn is in it. He was satisfied. It was Adrian Brody. So George Clooney he knew the deal when George Clooney showed up on set, and it's been documented. Terrence Malick was just kind of straight up. He was just like, I didn't necessarily request you in this movie, but you're a name, and I need you. Blah blah blah. Whereas Adrian Brody was made to believe he was going to be one of the stars, and then when the movie premiered, and it's like Adrian Brody's in the movie from beginning to end, but he's literally sprinkled from here and there.
Yeah.
So, and to this day, Adrian Brody, which I get. I mean, he's still not happy with.
I was just thinking about The Pianist the other day. I sometimes that movie just
saw that once actually.
It just comes back to me, and I think about the way that he just. There's so much complexity in that movie, and the way that you really feel what it would feel like to be trying to hide.
Those were my college years. Yeah.
Hide in the fray of Nazis just hunting every inch for you.
Yeah.
So, what do you tell me what you think about the controversies over the sex stuff? What do you think about that stuff?
What do I think about it? I go back to, again, I'm not a millennial, but I'd like to say I'm still on the younger side. So knowing what I know, just like a couple of years after Andrei Rublev, thinking of other countries, and it's like, this is it? Like, this was a problem? Like, I feel like that about that, like a lot of films, like from the 1950s and 1960s, where it's like, really? This was an issue? But I get it. I like to say I'm an old soul. Like, I'm an only child, and I was around my grandparents a lot. I was around my parents a lot. So I do know that, like, back, certain things
what did your parents
people
do?
Gasp. My mom was a high school teacher, and my father was a social worker.
What subject did your mom teach?
She taught electives. She taught business management. She taught keyboarding. She taught one other class that I can't remember. My dad was also a teacher. My dad, before he got into social work, focusing particularly in seeing that people throughout New England found employment. People who were physically or developmentally disabled got a fair shot at employment. I don't know what his exact job title was, but before he got into that, which he did for decades, he was actually a teacher at Rikers Island. So I've got a lot of stories. We're talking late 70s Rikers Island, so I got a lot of stories.
Boy, yeah, that's the people who died Jim Carroll era of Rikers.
Yeah. But going back to what you're saying, it's like, I guess I get it now. But it doesn't faze me. I'm still like, what was the issue? Like, what was, the problem? But I understand that back then, I don't want to call people prudes, but just like the standards and what got people up in arms, it's a lot different now. It almost seems like, to some degree, it's like we're reverting back because it's easy. I hate, because, it's going to make me sound like some alt-right guy or some conservative, which is everybody's offended. But to some degree, it's a lot of things are offensive to people now, but it's a weird era in, because a lot of things offend people, but at the same time, especially in terms of movies, what gets across as, like, say, PG-13 would be like rated X, in the 50s or 60s,
Well, sure. What's the Spielberg war movie?
Saving Private
Ryan, which no way, if it had been any other filmmaker, would have gotten a PG rating.
Of course. Was it PG?
Yeah.
I thought it was PG-13.
Oh, okay. PG.
No. I really don't know. I've seen the movie. I never looked into it.
It probably was PG-13,
Yeah.
but I mean, that movie's a hard R.
Of
There's
course.
no question about it.
Yeah. Just Adam Goldberg's death, the slow knife, like that.
Well, that opening, like 15-minute opening sequence of them on the beach is
exactly.
Oh my gosh, it's just brutal.
That was I think that was my junior year of high school, and I remember.
I think that's 98.
Yeah, 98. Yeah, my junior year of high school. One of my assistant track coaches was like so heavily affected by it because he served in World War II, and he was just like, that's how it was. I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of Saving Private Ryan, but I feel like if you were there and in the shit, you would know more than me. So.
Right? Yeah. But I feel like it's one thing to line up a bunch of nails and hammer them, but it's a whole different thing to take a story Tarkovsky's done with Andrei Rublev,
Sure.
and say, you were watching a scene and you can see like a couple that are in the background in a doorway, sleeping.
That woman's face, like Jesus.
Sorry
for those who can't.
And
sorry, those who can't see.
There's no dialogue. I think if you looked at the dialogue for Andrei Rublev, it would probably be about 80 pages, and it's a 3-hour movie.
Yeah.
And so you're talking about somebody whose idea of cinematic storytelling is much more aligned with people like Bergman and Greenaway, who know that the story is in the atmosphere as much as it is in whatever the meat of, A says X to B. It's, there's so much more to it, and to have that regard for imagery and storytelling is something that sadly Hollywood has lost sight of completely. There's, you go to see any Hollywood movie, especially in the superhero movies, which has co-opted all of Hollywood, and there's nothing grounded about it.
That's true. It's funny you say Hollywood to me is separated up into so many different avenues. So it's like when it comes to because Andrei Rublev is an epic movie. So when I take the Hollywood epic, you're absolutely right. I couldn't agree more. But I'm one of those guys where I know the difference between a good and a bad film.
Let's talk about epic for a second, because that's a very important term of art, I think. And you look at what makes Andrei Rublev epic. Well, one of the things that makes it epic is the form. By telling the story in these 7 chapters, he's breaking the 3-act structure.
Yeah, of course.
Of every Hollywood movie that's just about ever been made. Yeah. So automatically we're looking at things through a lens of storytelling that's it's expanded.
Yeah.
It's condensed, it's minimalist, and yet it's expanded, and because it takes place over a long period of time.
Yes.
I don't think you necessarily have to cover, 5 decades for something to be epic, but you do have to cover more than a couple of decades, and this movie does that. Sure. So just to put it out there about what epic, because that's a word that gets thrown around. Oh, it's epic, and I think that
even
people,
outside of movies, everything is epic. Do you really know what epic means? Sometimes when people say that,
it means that you're covering a span of time, of historic time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. But now it's kind of been even I get if something is really long.
Yeah.
I consider it an epic. But going back to I'm not the biggest because I watch a lot of movies by say Tarkovsky or Haneke or Von Trier. Hanukkah. Yeah, it's
That's all right.
That's
right. I only know that because I interviewed him and I asked him. The first question I asked him was, "How do you pronounce your name?"
Yeah.
And he's like, "Just like Christmas, Hanukkah."
Yeah, I'm jealous of that. But it's just those movies take up Seventh Continent.
Yeah.
So when you watch that, I need a Black Panther and I need. And Infinity War, but unfortunately, we're
wait
in
a minute.
time.
All right, so wait a minute. So you need that as a bomb to if you watched Benny's video, then you want to go watch Black Panther. Is that what you're telling me?
Absolutely.
Really?
But see, the thing is, it stops there. I don't think Black Panther is
it's
a movie.
Black Panther's a palate cleanser.
I don't know if it. No, I don't like to even use that term because I don't want my palate cleansed of a Benny's video.
Okay.
It's just more I need to calm down. I need to just not think about this depressing shit for a little while and laugh and have a good time. The only problem is we're in an era now.
When Harry Met Sally for that.
That's one of those movies where it's I get why people love it, but it's not my thing.
But I mean, I'm just using any example.
No. And there's a lot, but at the same time, we're in a weird period where if I can't say, hey, I enjoyed Black Panther. I enjoyed it a lot. But then I don't want to get grouped into people who think it's the most important movie ever made because those people exist. A lot of them work at the Academy Awards evidently because now they most popular film.
Exactly. I think that is a complete shoehorn for Black Panther. I think that is what the Academy Awards is up to.
And what the problem is from the get-go, you should have just treated all movies equal. You shouldn't. It's not just all about
Well, but see, if you
Schindler's List and Saving Private Ryan, like every movie, like so many other movies are, important. So now there's this weird dividing line that I hate. It always existed, but they pretty much set it now with this category. So it's like, yeah. But or like Game Night, I can't recommend that movie enough.
Oh, you like Game Night?
I love that movie.
I thought it was okay. I thought there were some flaws. I enjoyed it.
I think for me, because when you take the leading man, like no disrespect, but take Jason Bateman out of it.
It's based off of the game. Like that's what.
Of course it is from the relationship between the brothers, like Sean Penn and Mike. It's just, of course it is. Oh,
but see, I would say go back and watch the game. I think the game's a much better movie than that one.
It's almost different. You know what? Let's bring it to Tarkovsky. So for me, the game, it's like Solaris. I love Soderbergh's Solaris.
Yeah,
love it to death. I say that unironically, not to start shit. I really love that movie. And given Soderbergh is such a cinephile.
Yeah.
There's those movies because Solaris is an amazing movie.
But Soderbergh is nowhere near the class of Tarkovsky. I have a problem with Soderbergh. I recently watched The Informant, and I watched Out of Sight.
Oh,
Out of Sight is almost unwatchable.
What?
It's hard to get.
That's a great movie.
It has a lot of a lot of great cameos. But the thing is, I think people have this idea that Soderbergh is this great filmmaker, this great director, and I have to say, I think compared to somebody like Von Trier, I would give, if Von Trier,
he can hold his own to Von Trier.
I don't.
Here's the problem.
I think if Von Trier is your 10, I think that Soderbergh is somewhere between 4 and 5.
And and the reason I think that you and other people feel that way is because, and this is through Soderbergh's fault, if he's even concerned with being ranked or whatever, I think Soderbergh does too much let me throw some shit at the wall and see what sticks. Half of his filmography is like that.
Okay, well,
so
that's
I totally understand. And that's a problem. No, it is. I think Soderbergh is totally he's the kind of guy that gets bored easily, but it's kind of like just because, I love Soderbergh, but it's like just because you're...
What's the movie that he's in where he's the actor?
Schizopolis. Well, that movie's great. Schizopolis is so good.
See, I found that movie unwatchable.
My thing is, like what I was saying earlier is like Soderbergh's the kind of guy who's like, hey, look, just because you're bored doesn't mean I have to pay money and sit and watch the result of you being bored. So I understand pushback on Soderbergh, but at the end of the day, I think if literally 50% of his filmography did not exist, we'd be speaking differently of him. But unfortunately, we can't do that because
I feel like he's somebody who didn't really come through on the promise. You look at Sex, Lies, and Videotape, which I saw that movie when it came out, and it was groundbreaking.
I remember it was a big deal.
It was really,
but I think that was
really
stuff put on him. I don't know if he wanted to stick to that. I think he wanted to do it. I think he wanted to do all that stuff.
Because he was, that movie's groundbreaking because of the way that he dealt with
relationship
sexuality,
loss, male jealousy,
yuppie America, Wall Street, all of that, all those ideals are in there without putting too fine a point on it. He was, he took a really daring approach, and we wanted all of his movies to be that daring. And the only to look at, a truly daring filmmaker like Von Trier or Tarkovsky, he's not daring. He's so safe. Soderbergh is super safe.
I think it's the opposite.
Ocean's 11. Come on.
Exactly, but like in the same year, he'll do something. I think it's not so much safe. I just think it just goes back to being bored. Like, I'll do 2 to 3 movies a year, and it's like, whoa, slow down. Like, just relax. Like, I don't know about safe. I think it's the opposite of safe. It's like he gambles too much, if anything. It's like, whoa, going back to Ocean's 11 in Vegas, it's like you're gambling too much. Like, slow down, pace yourself. Like, that's what makes me think. But let's not, as much as I love Von Trier, he's got some stinkers too. He has his boss of it all. He's got,
Yeah, okay.
And he's got Epidemic is not, although there's a great shot, the air balloon scene is totally lifted and put in Epidemic.
I know, I love how we keep coming back to this because the opening of this movie of Andrei Rublev is so beautiful, and it really sets the tone for the movie because you, as the audience member, you have this experience of First Flight, and we get that 2 and 8.5. Fellini,
Oh,
I was
sure,
trying to
sure.
figure out
Yes.
if Fellini if this movie came out
Right,
before
right.
8.5, because we get that. I think it's 8.5, where we get the thing
opening scene
where he floats up out of the car.
Yes, the opening scene.
That's this movie.
Absolutely.
Right, and that came out
even from the view, like you look down.
Yeah. So that came out after this, right?
Do
we
we
know
was
that?
first.
So Tarkovsky stole from Fellini?
Not necessarily. And that's another thing too. I
Maybe
mean,
he did.
Maybe he did. Maybe he didn't. I mean, he's open about like.
Nothing wrong with that.
Of course, he loves his Bergman. He loves his Kurosawa. But he's also a guy, like, if you read, especially the book Andrei Tarkovsky interviews, any movie that has any hint of entertainment, he just wasn't a fan of. Which is why it's like, I love Tarkovsky, but it's like, I don't know if we could hang out. With all due respect, but I don't know if I could hang out. I don't know if I could
So what
hang out
about
with
the
him.
entertainment aspect?
He would say, he's like, movies shouldn't be entertainment. I'm not interested in movies that are entertaining. These are his words.
Well,
So,
yeah,
which kind of bums me out to some degree, because
No,
it's
but
like,
see,
I love Van Damme and I love your movies.
That's like Derek Jeter saying, "Yeah, I think home runs are a little show offy." I mean, come
What?
on,
Shut the fuck up,
it's
Jesus.
exactly.
Yeah.
But Derek Jeter would never say that. And also, I think that all filmmakers, the fact that you're a filmmaker means that you're an entertainer.
Sure. I think he would. I think Tarkovsky himself would argue that, but I agree.
Yeah, I mean
To some degree, yeah.
That's the wood that you hammer the nail in.
Mm-hmm.
If that wood isn't there, that nail's not going to stick.
Sure.
So
Sure.
that's a great.
Absolutely.
I love it. That's a great. I think
Yeah.
that's a great way to wrap up.
All the movies on my phone,
This
by the way.
this episode. Oh yeah. All right, Marcus is
From Buffalo
is
66
flashing.
to yeah.
Well, Vincent Gallo, boy, there's some promise that didn't really come through either.
That's another topic. I would love to. I could talk about him and his 2 movies, although he's got a 3rd one that we'll never see for hours as well. Yeah, I'd love to come back and talk again. I think
Yeah,
we've already got.
absolutely.
It's like what we've already Far From Heaven, Mandalay. There's already some future episodes.
Absolutely, no question about it. Well, I thank all of my listeners so much for taking the time to share this conversation that we have with a little Stone Delicious IPA.
Very good. Yeah.
And my pal, my newest friend, Marcus Pinn.
Yes.
Please visit Pinland Empire. That's PINN.
PINNLAND Empire.com.
Look it up on Twitter. Follow
absolutely.
Marcus on Twitter.
Yeah, at Pinland_Empire. And if you go just to Pinland Empire, everything that I'm involved in, from Zebras in America, which is on Google Play, iTunes, SoundCloud,
Podcast.
my podcast, Pink Smoke. Other sites that I've written for in the past, like PinlandEmpire.com is the hub for all of that. So go to my site and get lost. If you're listening now, some of my most recent, I was lucky enough to see Black Klansman a little early before it came out. So I wrote some words about that. I've got a piece up about Sarah Polley's filmography. I've been writing about.
Nice.
I write about Tarkovsky a lot. I had a recent piece about Persona. My most recent thing up is about Always Shine. By the time this comes out, the new episode of Zebras in America will be out. That's episode 68, I believe. So, and if you want to, it's at ZebrasPod on Twitter. So, yeah.
All right. Love it. And please visit colesmithy.com. If you look at the upper right corner, you'll see where you can contribute on Patreon, which I encourage you all to do. There's rewards. You can contribute. You can pledge as little as $5 a month, on up to as much as $1,000 a month if you're loaded. And please remember to turn your cell phones off when you're walking, driving, riding a bicycle, or watching a movie.